Welcome back, Coinology. In the vast timeline of American coinage, few objects have traveled through as many hands, carried as many stories, and endured as many decades of mystery as the 1971 Lincoln cent. At first glance, it appears ordinary, a small, copper-colored disc, a single cent, humble in value yet mighty in symbolism. But behind its worn edges and familiar portrait lies a story of precision, craftsmanship, national pride, and extraordinary rarity that has stunned collectors and historians alike. The year was 1971. The United States stood at a crossroads of change, a time of economic evolution, political uncertainty, and cultural awakening. Amid this backdrop, the U.S. Mint continued its centuries-old duty, striking coins that would serve not just as tools of commerce, but as symbols of identity and history. From the bustling city of Denver, deep in the heart of Colorado, millions of 1-cent coins were produced bearing the simple yet powerful mark, the letter D. The small d stamped below the year on the coin's obverse side marked its origin, the Denver Mint. For generations, this mint had been known for precision, reliability, and sheer volume of production. But among the countless coins struck that year, a few, perhaps only a handful, would emerge decades later as numismatic legends, commanding values unimaginable to the ordinary citizen. To understand the 1971 D penny's journey, we must begin with its design, a design rooted in American history. On its obverse, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States, faces right, a design introduced in 1909 to commemorate the centennial of Lincoln's birth. Sculpted by Victor David Brenner, this image became an enduring symbol of integrity, humility, and leadership. The designer's initials, VDB, rest subtly beneath Lincoln's shoulder, a tribute to the artist's mastery and the nation's reverence for its fallen leader. The reverse side bears the image of the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo. The memorial had replaced the earlier wheat stalks in 1959, marking Lincoln's 150th birthday. Gasparo's design symbolized not only the physical monument in Washington, D.C., but also the endurance of Lincoln's ideals: equality, unity, and perseverance. And if one looks closely, between the central columns of the miniature memorial, the faint figure of Lincoln himself can be seen, a detail so small that many casual observers overlook it entirely. Yet it reminds us that even in metal form, the spirit of Lincoln remains ever present, watching over the nation he helped preserve. The composition of the 1971 D penny was primarily 95% copper and 5% zinc, a standard alloy used for cents during that era. Each coin weighed 3.11 grams, with a diameter of 19.05 millimeters and a thickness of 1.52 millimeters. These precise measurements ensured consistency, the silent standardization that defined the mint's excellence. Yet, within that uniformity, the tiniest of imperfections or variations could transform a coin's destiny. A microscopic error in striking, a misaligned die, or a change in alloy composition could make the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and one worth millions. The Denver Mint struck over 2.9 billion Lincoln cents in 1971. For most, these coins flowed into circulation without distinction, filling cash registers, pockets, and piggy banks across America. But a few, as later discovered, possessed characteristics so rare, so mysterious, that they defied logic. Whether through minting anomalies, experimental strikes, or unique die varieties, these rare 1971 D cents would one day be appraised at astronomical values, one of them reaching the near mythical figure of $174 million in modern collector markets. But before we speak of wealth, we must first understand the foundation, the human effort behind the metal. Inside the Denver Mint, machines roared with rhythm and precision. Sheets of copper alloy were fed into presses, where circular blanks, called planchets, were cut out by the thousands. Each blank was heated, cleaned, and polished before being struck by powerful dies that imprinted Lincoln's image and the memorial on opposite sides. This process, repeated millions of times, was overseen by skilled technicians who balanced the mechanical with the meticulous. For them, perfection was the goal, though in truth, perfection is an illusion in the world of minting. Every die wears down. Every press shifts slightly. Every metal sheet contains minute variations. It is within these natural imperfections that rarity is born. Somewhere among the billions, a few 1971 D cents were struck with doubled dies, where a slight misalignment during hubbing caused the design elements to appear doubled, most visibly in the inscription's Liberty or the date 1971. Others bore striking errors, such as off-center impressions, die cracks, or even transitional alloy compositions, coins that may have been struck on planchets intended for foreign contracts or experimental materials. For decades, these coins circulated unnoticed, their extraordinary nature hidden beneath the grime of everyday life. Children might have spent them on candy, cashiers might have handed them out as change, and no one would have guessed that one of these small copper discs would one day command a fortune greater than the GDP of small nations. The 1971 D cent became more than a coin, it became a time capsule. Each mark, each scratch, each trace of wear told a story of where it had been and who had held it. It passed through generations, across towns, through wars, through moments of joy and despair. The simplicity of its design belied the depth of its history. And as the decades rolled by, collectors began to take notice. In the 1980s and 1990s, coin grading and certification transformed the numismatic world. Experts with magnifying lenses and electron microscopes began examining every detail of older coins. When the 1971 Lincoln cents came under scrutiny, they discovered variants so flawless or so uniquely flawed that they were unlike any other. Some were preserved in mint-state condition, gleaming as though struck yesterday. Others bore mysterious doubling or lustrous anomalies that hinted at experimental metallurgy. As stories spread through collector circles, rumors of high-value 1971 cents began to surface. At first, these tales were dismissed as exaggerations until verified specimens began appearing in major auctions. One coin, a near-perfect mint state with an extraordinary doubling effect and unique copper zinc layering, fetched a staggering price. Its auctioneer's gavel struck the podium with a sound that echoed through the numismatic world, $174 million. But what made it so valuable? To the untrained eye, it was identical to the penny in any pocket. Yet under magnification, the coin revealed a breathtaking anomaly, a minting feature never documented before. Scholars debated whether it was the result of a prototype die, a transitional alloy test, or even a deliberate strike produced under experimental authorization. Whatever its origin, its rarity was absolute, one of a kind. And rarity, in the world of coin collecting, is the true alchemy that turns copper into gold today. The story of the 1971 penny is told not just in museums and collector vaults, but in the whispers of treasure hunters and enthusiasts who search their change, dreaming of discovery. For every coin still in circulation, there lies the possibility that another hidden treasure exists, waiting to be found, waiting to rewrite numismatic history once again. As the camera pans slowly across an aged 1971 cent, its copper surface glowing warmly under the light, the narrator's voice softens. Sometimes, he says, the smallest things hold the greatest stories. A single cent, minted over half a century ago, can remind us that value is not measured by size, but by rarity, history, and the invisible hand of time. The scene fades to black, but the story continues. In Part 2, the mystery deepens as we trace how one of the most common coins in American history became one of the most valuable objects ever struck by human hands. As the years passed, whispers turned into stories, and stories became legend. The 1971 Lincoln cent, once dismissed as common pocket change, began to emerge from obscurity. Coin hunters, metal detectorists, and numismatists alike spoke in reverence of its mythic worth. The question lingered: how could a coin meant to be worth just 1 cent evolve into a treasure commanding over $100 million? To answer that, we must journey back to the moment of discovery. It was said to have begun with a collector in Colorado, a man whose passion for small details bordered on obsession. He'd spent decades searching for minting anomalies, studying luster, die polish lines, and even the direction of metal flow on struck surfaces. One evening, as he examined a batch of uncirculated pennies from a forgotten roll marked Denver 1971, something unusual caught his eye. Under his magnifier, the coin seemed alive, its surface shimmered differently, the fields were unusually reflective, and the edges bore a faint irregularity not found in standard strikes. But what truly set it apart was the doubling, subtle yet undeniable, in the word liberty and the date 1971. The D-mint mark itself appeared slightly misplaced, almost floating, as if struck from a die not perfectly aligned. Days turned into weeks of study. The collector compared it against thousands of other 1971 cents, consulted minting manuals, and even wrote to the U.S. Mint for clarification. The Mint's reply was brief and cautious: they could not confirm the anomaly without physical examination. That's when he decided to send the coin to the Professional Coin Grading Service, known simply as PCGS, one of the world's leading coin authentication bodies. When the graders received it, they were intrigued. Under high magnification and spectral light analysis, the coin revealed microstructures not seen on ordinary 1971 strikes. The copper layers exhibited an unexpected density variation, and there was speculation that this coin might have been struck using an experimental planchet, possibly from a batch designed for a metallurgical test. Within weeks, PCGS issued their verdict: genuine. Mint error. Unique. The coin received a mint state 68 grade, near perfection. Its brilliance, strike sharpness, and surface preservation were beyond anything previously recorded for the date. News spread like wildfire through collector communities. Forums lit up with debate. Some claimed it was a hoax, others called it a miracle. But when the coin was placed in a major auction, attended by international bidders, reality shattered expectations. The bidding began conservatively, a few $1,000s, then tens of thousands, then millions. Each bid came faster than the last, as the world's wealthiest collectors competed for a piece of history. Cameras flashed. Voices murmured. And then, the hammer fell: $174 million, the room fell silent. The air itself seemed to pause. That night, the 1971 descent entered the realm of immortality, but beyond the staggering number, the story held deeper meaning. It wasn't just about wealth, it was about rarity, craftsmanship, and human curiosity. A single cent, something most people would overlook or lose without a thought, had proven that value can lie hidden in plain sight. In the aftermath, the coin's identity became legend. It was housed in a temperature-controlled vault, its surface never to be touched by human hands again. Scholars, historians, and metallurgists studied its microstructure, debating theories about its creation. Some proposed that during 1971, the Denver Mint might have tested new alloy mixtures to reduce production costs, possibly striking a handful of experimental pieces before returning to standard copper zinc compositions. If this coin was one of those prototypes, it represented a lost chapter of mint history, a mistake, or perhaps a secret test never meant to reach the public. Meanwhile, the story reignited public fascination with coin collecting. Television shows, news outlets, and online documentaries began covering the penny that shook the world. Young viewers, inspired by the tale, began checking their own coins, hoping to find treasure among their change. The 1971 descent became a symbol of hope, patience, and possibility, but while one example sold for $174 million, other varieties of the 1971 D penny also began to rise in value. Coins with strong doubling, exceptional luster, or perfect preservation in uncirculated rolls began fetching hundreds, even thousands of dollars. The once ignored year became a new frontier for treasure hunters. As experts re-examined Denver Mint archives, they uncovered intriguing records, notes referring to experimental die tests and material tolerance adjustments conducted in the early 1970s. Though no official documentation confirmed the exact anomaly of the million-dollar coin, these hints suggested that 1971 had indeed been a year of quiet experimentation within the mint. The US was transitioning to new metal compositions for coinage in later decades, and these early trials may have produced unexpected results. In dimly lit laboratories, modern researchers began scanning known specimens using electron microscopes. They found that certain 1971 D coins had microstrata of zinc and copper inconsistent with normal mint standards, layers that appeared thinner or thicker in unpredictable ways. Perhaps the million-dollar cent was part of that test batch, accidentally released into circulation by oversight or human error. The narrator's tone deepens as soft orchestral music swells. When machines meet metal, accidents are inevitable. But sometimes, those accidents create art. And sometimes, they create legends. Collectors around the globe began to re-evaluate the very idea of worth. A penny, they realized, was not just a unit of currency, it was a story frozen in copper. Every coin had a birth, a journey, and a destiny. Some would be lost to time, melted, or discarded. Others would endure, transcending generations, to become relics of immeasurable cultural value. As the 1971 D penny's fame grew, so did the myths surrounding it. Rumors circulated of other extraordinary examples hidden away, coins with mirror-like proofs, off-metal strikes, or misaligned D mint marks. A few surfaced in private collections, though none matched the perfection of the record-breaking specimen. Still, each discovery added fuel to the legend. In numismatic circles, the coin was often described as the copper miracle. Auctioneers spoke of it with reverence. Museums requested to borrow it for exhibitions celebrating American minting history. The Smithsonian Institution expressed interest in cataloging it, though its private owner chose anonymity. Even now, decades later, the exact circumstances of its creation remain unsolved. Was it a deliberate test strike? A minting anomaly? Or perhaps the result of a technician's private experiment that slipped into circulation unnoticed? The truth lies buried in the archives of history, or perhaps, in another undiscovered roll of 1971 descent sitting in someone's attic. The film's visuals glide across a montage of copper coins, some new, some aged by time. The narrator's voice returns, measured and reflective. Every coin is more than metal. It carries the fingerprints of a nation, the breath of its people, and the echo of the moment it was made. And sometimes, that echo refuses to fade. The 1971 D penny endures as a symbol of that truth, a humble cent that rose from the mundane to the magnificent. Its value, though quantified in dollars, transcends money itself. It represents the pursuit of knowledge, the thrill of discovery, and the eternal reminder that history hides in the smallest of places. As part 2 closes, the camera pans across the glowing vault where the coin rests, sealed, silent, untouched. Reflections dance across its copper surface, like sunlight on water. The narrator whispers, "Some say luck is random. But perhaps it is simply patience meeting opportunity, 1 cent at a time." Fade to black, soft piano plays, the words appear, "To be continued." When a coin becomes legend, it leaves the realm of ordinary objects and enters a place between history and myth. The 1971 D Lincoln cent now lived in that space, a single copper disc, barely larger than a thumbnail, that had defied logic, ignited curiosity, and challenged everything the numismatic world thought it knew. After the record-shattering auction, experts from across the globe converged to understand how such a phenomenon could exist. The halls of the American Numismatic Association buzzed with theories. Some spoke of minting errors, others whispered of secret experiments conducted under the radar of official records. Laboratories were opened, microscopes aligned, and the quest for truth began. The coin, now under secure custody, was granted to a select panel of metallurgists and mint historians for non-invasive analysis. It was placed inside a seal chamber, where scanning electron beams would map every ridge, every molecule. The results were astonishing. The microscopic structure of the metal revealed density patterns inconsistent with the typical copper zinc alloy of the era. Tiny crystalline formations hinted that the planchet might have undergone unusual cooling processes, producing a shine that appeared almost proof-like despite being struck in a circulation press. The edge showed faint compression rings, suggesting a slightly higher striking pressure, possibly an experimental adjustment meant to test die longevity. To the untrained eye, these were invisible. But under magnification, they told a story of a coin born under unique conditions, a perfect storm of precision, error, and chance. Meanwhile, mint archives were scoured for clues. In dusty ledgers from the early 1970s, historians found fragments of correspondence between mint supervisors discussing metallurgical variation trials. Though the documents never explicitly mentioned the lincensant, they spoke of copper planchets with alternate zinc ratios, pressure calibration tests, and die tempering experiments. Some of these trials were rumored to have occurred at the Denver Mint itself, the same facility where the mysterious coin originated. The narrator's tone deepens, a measured calm cutting through the soft hum of orchestral strings. Perhaps this was never meant to exist. Perhaps it slipped through time, a message in metal, whispering secrets of a forgotten experiment. As word of these findings spread, collectors became obsessed. Online forums grew into digital treasure hunts. Every magnifying glass, every roll of old pennies became a potential gateway to fortune. Families rummaged through jars of change inherited from grandparents, searching for even the faintest sign of doubling or unusual color tones. Pawnshops began advertising, "We buy 1971D pennies, any condition." Amateur numismatists filmed themselves unwrapping rolls, hoping to catch a glimpse of history. Social media transformed the story into a modern-day legend, the penny worth millions. Yet, in the midst of this excitement, the scientific community pressed forward. They were not satisfied with rumor. They wanted data, evidence, repeatable results. Could there be more than one? To test this, researchers acquired hundreds of 1971D cents in varying grades. Using spectral analysis, they mapped trace elements within the metal. Out of the hundreds tested, only one showed a signature even remotely similar to the $1 million coin, and even that one lacked the extraordinary luster and strike pressure anomalies. The implication was clear: the $174 million cent was, as far as evidence suggested, unique. Still, its uniqueness posed deeper questions. Was it a product of accident, a single misfed planchet during an experimental phase, or something intentional, struck by human hands as a test, then lost to circulation? The U.S. Mint officially declined to speculate, issuing a carefully worded statement acknowledging the coin's existence but affirming that no authorized experiments producing such specimens were recorded. That silence only fueled the legend. Collectors began attributing mystical qualities to the coin. Some said it brought good luck, others claimed it symbolized the perfection hidden in imperfection. For the numismatic community, however, it became a symbol of the unpredictable beauty of minting, proof that even in the age of machines, miracles could still happen. At conferences, experts debated for hours. Could the coin have been struck on a leftover planchet from a foreign contract? The Denver Mint, after all, occasionally produced coinage for other nations during the 1970s. Records show that planchets for several countries' smaller denominations shared similar copper-based alloys. If one of those blanks accidentally entered the U.S. cent production line, the resulting coin could indeed show a distinct composition. Others believed it was a test piece for a proposed alloy shift that never went into full production. A what-if of American minting history, preserved in a single, unrepeatable strike. The narrator pauses, then continues with a tone of reverence. In every age, there are artifacts that challenge certainty. They remind us that even the most ordinary things can conceal the extraordinary, that beneath the surface of metal lies the mystery of intention and chance. Meanwhile, the private owner of the 1971D cent remained anonymous, communicating only through legal representatives. It was said that the coin was stored in a vault beneath reinforced steel and glass, with temperature and humidity maintained at exact parameters to preserve its copper hue. Periodically, the coin was rephotographed, its brilliance unchanged. Museums continued to petition for public exhibition. When permission was finally granted for a short-term display at a major numismatic exposition, thousands lined up to see it. Under protective lighting, it seemed to glow with an inner fire. Cameras clicked, but no flash could capture the full depth of its color, a soft, almost golden red that seemed to pulse with history. Children pressed their faces against the glass, asking their parents how something so small could be worth so much. The answer, of course, was that it wasn't just metal, it was story, human story, national story, the story of creation and discovery colliding in a single instant. Scholars published papers, investors speculated, counterfeiters even tried to replicate the coin, prompting new technologies in authentication. PCGS and NGC began incorporating microscopic digital signatures and holographic tagging to combat forgery attempts inspired by the legend, but beyond science and security, the deeper narrative persisted. The 1971 descent had become a metaphor for persistence, for curiosity, for the idea that greatness can arise from the smallest beginnings. As the music swells, the camera pans across archival footage, Denver mint workers in 1971, heavy machinery pounding rhythmically, coins cascading down conveyor belts in a rain of copper light, the narrator's voice returns, soft yet powerful. They did not know what they were creating. In their hands lay a nation's reflection, 1,000 strikes, 1,000 identical faces. Yet among them, one emerged different. One carried the fingerprint of history. The film transitions to images of collectors at work, magnifiers glinting, gloves handling coins with reverence, notebooks filled with annotations. Then to laboratories, where scientists analyze data lines glowing on computer screens. Then to children, sorting through jars of pennies on kitchen tables, their eyes filled with wonder, because that, ultimately, is what the 1971 descent represents. Wonder. As the narrator concludes this chapter, it is not the copper, nor the mint mark, nor the luster that gives it value. It is the imagination it awakens, the reminder that beneath the ordinary, the extraordinary always waits to be found. The scene fades to a wide shot of the night sky, stars glittering like coins scattered across darkness, soft strings rise as the words appear. Part 3 END.to be continued in Part 4, The Legacy and the Hunt. The story of the 1971 Lincoln cent did not end with its auction, or with the sealed vault that now guards it. If anything, that was where the story began anew, not in the minting presses of Denver, but in the hearts of millions who heard its tale across America, and far beyond. A quiet movement began. Ordinary people started to look closer at the change in their pockets. What once seemed worthless suddenly carried potential, mystery, and the thrill of discovery. In kitchens, in garages, in schoolrooms, lights glowed late into the night as magnifiers and smartphones illuminated jars of coins. Collectors called it the copper fever. The narrator's voice flows over images of families gathered around tables, pennies spilling like tiny sunsets across the wood. It began as curiosity, the voice says, but soon became something deeper, a rediscovery of connection, of patience, of wonder. Coin clubs saw membership soar. Antique shops began placing small signs near their registers. We checked 1971 descents for free. Television hosts invited numismatic experts to explain what made that one coin so special. Even school teachers used the story as a lesson in probability, history, and value, proof that mathematics and art could meet in a single inch of metal. Meanwhile, the legend reached beyond collectors. Artists began sculpting copper installations inspired by the coin. A poet in Chicago wrote verses titled 1 Cent Eternity. A filmmaker in Seoul released a short film about a boy who finds a rare penny in his grandfather's toolbox. The 1971 descent had crossed borders and languages, becoming a symbol of the human desire to find meaning in the smallest things. In the professional numismatic world, however, the excitement carried new urgency. If one such coin existed, could there be another? Teams of specialists began systematically cataloging every known roll of 1971 descents still sealed in original mint packaging. Banks were contacted. Estate sales were combed. Collectors who had stored uncirculated boxes decades ago found themselves fielding offers from museums and investors. Under laboratory lights, researchers performed new kinds of analysis: ultraviolet imaging, magnetic resonance mapping, 3D surface scanning, hoping to detect even the faintest trace of anomaly. Each time a coin displayed unusual reflectivity, hearts raced. Each time the tests came back normal, disappointment gave way to determination. The hunt became global. In Europe, Japanese, and Middle Eastern collector markets, American pennies that once sold for a few cents began fetching hundreds. Shipping companies recorded a quiet boom in coin parcels moving across oceans. The 1971 D had become more than an object, it was now an idea, a modern treasure map without a clear destination. The camera glides through dim archives, shelves stacked with mint reports and aged blueprints. Pages flutter as researchers turn to handwritten notes dated 1971. References to batch variances, dye fatigue studies, non-standard pressure trials. Each clue deepens the mystery rather than solves it. Voiceover: in every riddle, the answer hides in plain sight, and yet, sometimes the search matters more than the solution. Back at the Denver Mint, tours became more crowded than ever. Visitors stood before the great presses that still churned new coins, imagining the moment when, decades ago, a single plancha changed destiny. Guides spoke softly of the cent that became legend. Somewhere, perhaps, one of those visitors dropped a modern penny into the donation box, another small act of faith in the endless cycle of chance. As the years rolled forward, the coin's image began to appear on magazine covers, podcasts, and Even museum posters. In New York, an exhibition titled The 1 Cent Wonder displayed enlarged photographs of the coin's surface, every ridge and gleam magnified into a landscape of copper mountains and valleys. Visitors stood mesmerized, realizing that beauty could live in the most utilitarian object imaginable. Economists analyzed its sale, philosophers debated its meaning. Was it rational for a single cent to be valued at $174 million, or was it proof that human value is not bound by logic but by emotion, story, and rarity? The answer, as always, was both. Somewhere along the way, the 1971 penny stopped being only about money. It became a mirror, reflecting the hope that something miraculous might still be found in an age of mass production and digital precision. Every collector who sifted through coins was, in some sense, reaching back through time, touching history, touching mystery. The narrator's tone softens. Every object carries the memory of the hands that made it, and sometimes, when we look close enough, we see ourselves reflected back. Slowly, the film transitions to a scene of quiet, a child sitting by a window on a rainy evening, examining a penny under a flashlight, the sound of rain tapping against glass. The camera zooms in on the coin, ordinary, scratched, yet glowing faintly under the light. In that moment, the boundary between legend and reality fades. The voice continues. Perhaps this is the true legacy of the 1971 cent, not the fortune it commanded, but the curiosity it awakened. It taught millions that wonder can live in the smallest corners of the world, that history is not hidden in museums but waiting in the palm of your hand. The scene dissolves into archival images of the Denver Mint again, the rhythmic pounding of presses, copper blanks tumbling down steel chutes, sparks flickering in slow motion. Soft orchestral music rises, strings and piano intertwined. The narrator concludes, and so the search continues. For some, it is about riches. For others, it is about truth. But for all, it is about belief that within the countless coins struck each year, there may still be one that defies reason, one that tells the world that chance itself can become destiny. The frame fades to black. A final line appears on screen. When the hammer fell and the 1971 Lincoln cent became the most valuable penny in recorded history, the world paused, but science began to move. In the aftermath of the auction, economists, psychologists, and metallurgists joined historians and collectors in asking the same question: why? Why could a 1 cent coin, identical in shape and composition to billions of others, carry the weight of $174 million? The narrator's voice flows against the low hum of ambient strings. Value, he says, is not born in metal. It is born in meaning. That idea became the starting point for a new kind of investigation, one that reached beyond the mint and into the mind. The science of value. In laboratories at the Smithsonian, researchers began measuring what economists call perceived scarcity. They found that human brains respond to rarity the same way they respond to beauty or danger. When an object becomes unique, when chance isolates it from the ordinary, dopamine floods the circuits of curiosity. The 1971 cent, with its 1 in billions anomaly, was a perfect trigger. Computer simulations modeled what would happen if one additional identical specimen were ever discovered. Even then, analysts concluded, the value would scarcely fall, because the legend itself, once born, cannot be duplicated. The coin had transcended simple supply and demand. It had become a symbol. Meanwhile, metallurgists revisited the question of composition. Using atomic-level imaging, they confirmed again that the coin's copper contained micropockets of crystalline alignment that reflected light differently from any standard Denver issue. In technical reports, the term photonic luster anomaly appeared, language normally reserved for optics, not numismatics. The result was that the coin's shine behaved almost like a living surface, shifting under angles, responding to light as if aware of being observed, and so scientists found themselves describing beauty with data, translating wonder into wavelengths. Yet even with charts and measurements, they could not quantify the emotion that the coin stirred in people. The psychology of obsession. Across the world, sociologists began studying what they called the penny effect. In small towns and crowded cities, people who had never collected anything before began searching for coins. They spoke of it not as greed but as hope. Each coin became a lottery ticket, yes, but also a relic of national memory, something tangible in a digital age. Interviews revealed that collectors were drawn less by money than by the narrative of discovery. They loved the idea that a miracle could hide in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to see it. Psychologists compared it to stargazing or archaeology, the satisfaction of uncovering meaning from randomness. The film cuts to scenes of people opening rolls of pennies in their homes, close-ups of faces illuminated by lamplight, fingers turning small discs of copper as if they were artifacts from another world. Narrator, perhaps the real treasure is not in possession, but in pursuit. The search reminds us that patience still has a place in a hurried century. The economics of wonder. As fascination grew, the numismatic market changed. Demand for certified coins surged. Auction houses expanded their research departments. The U.S. Mint itself saw a spike in public tours, as people wanted to see where the legend began. Analysts at financial firms coined a new phrase, the rarity economy. They argued that the 1971 descent had demonstrated a psychological truth, that human beings assign enormous value to stories of uniqueness, especially when those stories are measurable, verifiable, and limited. Unlike art or stock prices, a unique coin carried a concrete boundary. There could only ever be one identical piece. In university seminars, students debated whether the coin's price represented irrational exuberance or a new form of cultural investment. Professors pointed out that art, too, once seemed irrational until museums gave it permanence. In time, they said, this penny might stand beside a Da Vinci or a Fabergé, not for its materials, but for its meaning. The rediscovery of craft inside the Denver Mint, workers spoke with pride. Generations had passed since 1971, but the presses still roared, the rhythm unchanged. A technician, interviewed for a documentary, smiled and said, when you strike billions of coins, you stop thinking about each one. But then a story like this reminds you, every strike is a heartbeat. Any one of them could last forever. To honor that spirit, a small exhibit was mounted inside the Mint's visitor hall. It displayed the history of the Lincoln cent, its origins, its evolution, its role in American life. At the center stood an empty pedestal with a simple engraving, the 1971 D, in absentia, proof that perfection once passed through here. Visitors often stood in silence before that space, as if the absence itself carried weight. The myth becomes memory years later, when the frenzy subsided and the world moved on to new discoveries. The legend of the 1971 D cent remained. It entered textbooks, museum plaques, and late-night stories shared between collectors. For many, it symbolized the turning point when numismatics became both science and art. Children who had once searched their parents' change jars grew up to become historians, engineers, artists. Some still kept their first 1971 D penny, ordinary, unremarkable, framed on a wall as a reminder of wonder. In the quiet of a museum archive, a curator polishes a display case, and the camera lingers on her reflection against a sheet of copper. The narrator speaks again, we chase value until we realize that value chases us. What we treasure most is the story we tell about it, the memory of searching, the shimmer of possibility. Closing sequence, soft music swells, the imagery slows. A time-lapse shows sunlight moving across a table scattered with coins. Dust motes drift in the air, glowing like tiny galaxies. From the beginning, the narrator whispers, a penny was meant to be spent. Yet one was spared by fate, to remind us that even in the smallest measure of worth, infinity can hide. 1 cent, one story, one world. The camera opens on a rotating globe bathed in amber light. The voice of the narrator returns, calm, resonant, familiar. When the story of a single coin crosses oceans, it stops being a relic of one nation. It becomes a mirror for all humanity's longing, for luck, for meaning, for permanence. From the United States to Asia, from Europe's narrow alleys to the markets of Africa, the legend of the 1971 D Lincoln cent spread like a rumor carried by the wind. Collectors in Tokyo compared it to ancient Koban. Gold dealers in London whispered its sale price as if speaking the name of a mythical creature. In small towns of South America, children began scouring pockets of change, dreaming of copper miracles. The global awakening in early years after the record-breaking auction, global mints noticed an unprecedented surge of public interest. The Royal Mint in Britain, the Royal Canadian Mint, and even the tiny island mints of the Pacific began receiving letters, thousands of them asking if similar miracles could happen in their own coinage. Documentary footage shows archivists unpacking envelopes filled with sketches and theories. One letter reads in looping handwriting, if one penny can change a life, maybe one in my country can too. International museums mounted exhibitions titled The Coin That Changed the World. Attendance soared beyond expectation. Visitors came not just to see coins but to touch the story itself, to feel the tactile evidence of how small acts of minting could ripple through history. The cultural rebirth of numismatics. Before the phenomenon, coin collecting had been a niche pursuit. After it, it became a shared language. Television shows appeared, dramatizing the hunts for lost mint errors. Universities launched interdisciplinary programs blending art history, metallurgy, and economics. A new generation of creators, artists, filmmakers, writers found inspiration in the copper disk's journey. They spoke of it as a symbol of humility made holy. Sculptors cast massive replicas of the Lincoln cent, 30 feet tall, installing them in public squares as monuments to perseverance. In classrooms, teachers used the coin's tale to explain probability, patience, and historical context. Children learned that the smallest artifact could carry the largest lessons. The narrator's tone softens. The 1971 D was more than metal. It was memory, magnified. It proved that curiosity, once awakened, can turn even the ordinary into legend. Treasure hunters of the modern age. Meanwhile, a new movement arose, modern treasure hunters equipped not with shovels but with technology. Online communities formed, their members scanning rolls of pennies, sharing magnified photographs, cataloging minute variations of die strikes. Digital microscopes replaced magnifying glasses, databases replaced notebooks. Yet the heartbeat remained the same, the thrill of discovery. In the Philippines, an old fisherman found an early Lincoln cent washed ashore and refused to sell it, saying, "It reminds me that luck travels on water." In Canada, a retired teacher donated her entire penny collection to fund scholarships for children interested in history. In Nigeria, students formed a club named the Copper Circle, dedicated to studying American coinage as an exercise in storytelling and perseverance. Everywhere, the legend bred community, and community bred purpose. The coin in pop culture. As the years passed, the 1971 cent entered cinema and literature. A best-selling novel titled Copper Infinity imagined the coin speaking from a museum case, recounting everything it had seen. A symphony called 1 Cent Eternal premiered in Vienna, its final movement shaped around the rhythm of a mint press. Clank, echo, silence. In Hollywood, a feature film depicted a young boy discovering the coin in his grandfather's attic, sparking a worldwide race between collectors and historians. Though fictional, it reignited interest and pushed real-world prices for Lincoln cents to new highs. Even fashion absorbed the myth. Designers embedded tiny penny motifs into jewelry, calling it the luck line. The market evolves. By the second decade of the 21st century, analysts noted that the coin market was no longer about possession alone. It had become an ecosystem of shared fascination. Virtual galleries allowed people to view high-definition scans of the legendary 1971 cent, rotating it with fingertip gestures as though they were holding it. Blockchain technology introduced certified digital twins of the coin, ensuring provenance in the digital age. Yet collectors still sought the physical presence of copper, the faint scent, the slight weight between thumb and forefinger. Economists compared the ongoing phenomenon to art inflation, except this time the canvas was smaller than a thumbnail. Beyond money through it all, one theme endured. The coin's worth was not truly measured in dollars but in imagination. When interviewed, the owner of the $174 million specimen spoke quietly, "I don't think of it as money. I think of it as a message, proof that value is born where belief and history meet." He kept it not in a vault but in a custom glass chamber surrounded by soft light, visited each morning like one might visit an old friend. He often said that the real treasure was seeing how one coin brought millions of people together. A world united by copper. The narrator returns, voice steady as a heartbeat. In every hand that turns a coin, there is a moment of connection. A century ago, it was merely change. Today, it is heritage. Tomorrow, perhaps, it will be myth. Footage rolls, families searching through jars, students studying old pennies, museum curators aligning displays under gentle light. The 1971 is shown only once, reflected on a lens, never directly, because by now, the audience knows it is more than an object, it is an idea. The camera pans upward to a night sky scattered with stars, each glinting like tiny copper sparks. The narration fades into a whisper. Some stories outlive their storytellers. Some shine forever, even in the dark. The frame fades in slowly. A single penny rests on a glass table. Above it, a shaft of light drifts through dust. The room is silent except for the hum of distant air. The narrator's voice enters, low, steady, reflective. Every artifact that survives its era carries more than history. It carries us, our questions, our pride, our impermanence. The 1971 Lincoln cent, once a product of machinery, now lives as a vessel of philosophy. In that small circle of copper lies a paradox, the most common object on Earth transformed into one of the rarest symbols of worth. And in that transformation, humanity finds itself reflected, fragile, hopeful, searching for meaning in the smallest things. The mirror of time. Coins, like people, travel, they pass from hand to hand, unseen witnesses to daily life, bread bought, wages earned, love letters mailed. A coin may sleep in a drawer for decades and then return to light as if no time had passed. The 1971 cent is a time traveler. When it resurfaced, it carried with it 50 years of human change, wars fought, technologies born, generations rising and fading. It reminded the world that even as we rush forward, our traces remain, waiting for rediscovery. The narrator pauses. If time erases all things, he asks, why do some moments refuse to be forgotten? The camera drifts across archival footage, mint workers of 1971, their faces blurred by age, presses pounding rhythmically, copper sheets sliding under steel. Each flash of the die captured a fraction of a second, but those seconds multiplied into immortality. The weight of meaning. The coin weighs just 3.11 grams, less than a teaspoon of dust. Yet it carries the weight of $174 million, and far beyond that, the invisible mass of wonder. Economists cannot explain this. Neither can philosophers fully define it. But poets understand, meaning does not measure in grams or dollars. It measures in echoes, in how long something continues to move the heart. A professor once said in an interview, we gave value to gold because it does not rust. We gave value to copper because it reminds us that we do. And perhaps that is the secret of the 1971 its beauty lies not in perfection but in survival. A coin meant for circulation endured to tell us that endurance itself is value, the human element. Every collector who ever held the coin has felt a tremor, not fear, not greed, but awe. The awareness that one is touching something that has touched countless lives. In that realization, the barrier between object and observer dissolves. Psychologists call it object empathy, the emotional projection of the self into a thing. But here, it becomes something larger, a communion across time. When you look at the coin, you see Lincoln's face, yes, but behind it, your own reflection. The narrator whispers, "We do not collect coins. We collect proof that we were here." The symbol of perseverance in every era, humanity creates icons, monuments of stone, towers of glass, constellations of data. Yet the penny endures as a humbler icon, born of repetition and routine. Its power lies in invisibility. It is the thing everyone ignores until one among billions becomes extraordinary. The 1971 descent reminds us that greatness often hides in plain sight, waiting for the patient eye. It tells a story that perfection does not emerge from design alone, but from accident, persistence, and recognition. In a society obsessed with novelty, the penny became a testament to endurance, proof that value can survive even in the smallest, most overlooked forms. The paradox of worth, at its core, is belief. Gold shines, but it is our faith that turns it into currency. A coin's image may be of a leader, but its true power comes from the collective imagination that sustains it. When the 1971 D sold for its unimaginable price, critics dismissed it as folly. But philosophers saw it as a modern myth, a story of faith manifested through metal. For what is money, if not the tangible shape of shared imagination? The narrator's voice deepens. In the end, the coin teaches us this: we do not worship wealth, we worship meaning disguised as wealth. The coin is philosopher. Imagine, for a moment, that the coin could speak. What would it say? Perhaps it would not boast of its price or its fame. Perhaps it would whisper, "I was made like all the others, I was lost, then found, I am proof that nothing ordinary stays ordinary forever." And in that whisper lies a universal truth, that everything created by human hands carries within it a seed of transcendence. A penny, a painting, a poem, each can outlive its maker and redefine eternity. Memory and metal museums say they preserve objects, but objects preserve us. The 1971 D Lincoln cent has become a capsule of humanity's yearning, a reminder that we once cared enough to look closely, to listen to the hum of copper, to name the unseen miracle. When visitors stand before its display, they are not merely seeing a coin. They are seeing themselves, reflected across decades of history, across the vast expanse between value and meaning. All that glitters is not gold, the narrator murmurs, but sometimes, what dulls still glows forever. The eternal question. The final act of Part 7 slows almost to stillness. The music fades to a single note. The narrator poses the question that has haunted every philosopher since the beginning of trade: is value something we find, or something we give? The screen fills with slow shots, coins tumbling in water, light bending across metal, faces of collectors closing their eyes as if praying. The answer, perhaps, is both. We find meaning in the world, and we give meaning back to it, and in that cycle, a penny becomes priceless. Closing sequence of Part 7. The narrator's final words arrive like the turning of a page of the 1971 D Lincoln cent will one day fade. The copper will darken. The hands that held it will vanish, but the story, the idea that wonder can hide in the smallest of things, that will endure. Soft orchestral chords bloom, and the image of the coin dissolves into a field of light. In that light, the outline of Lincoln's face lingers for a heartbeat, then disappears. A low hum opens the scene, not music, but the deep pulse of time itself. The camera floats through a vast digital archive, streams of binary code, holographic displays of ancient coins, glimmering threads of data weaving together like constellations. The narrator's voice enters, smooth and reflective. The story of the 1971 D Lincoln cent did not end in the past. It continues in the circuits of memory, in the pulse of every human who still believes that something small can change everything. From mint to matrix centuries ago, coins were forged by hand, their imperfections signs of life. Now, value is minted in the invisible algorithms, databases, cryptographic chains. Yet even here, the echo of the penny remains. Digital economies, blockchains, and AI valuation systems all trace their logic back to that same primitive question once asked of a copper coin: what gives something worth? The 1971 D cent became more than a relic, it became a model. Scholars of digital culture often cite it as the first modern artifact to show how human emotion can outweigh raw material. In a world where currency became code, the penny stood as a ghostly reminder that emotion, not equation, anchors belief. The narrator continues, in the age of data, the coin speaks louder than ever. It says, remember the hand that held me, not just the number that defines me. The coin in the cloud in a quiet museum in Washington, D.C., the 1971 D rests now within a climate-controlled vault, its temperature steady, its surface untouched. But outside those walls, millions of people visit it every day through a holographic projection accessible from any phone or headset. The museum's virtual reality replica lets visitors rotate the coin, zooming in until the microscopic ridges of Lincoln's profile become mountain ranges of copper. The sound design mimics the hum of the Denver mint presses, and as the virtual coin turns, faint whispers of history play, recordings of collectors, journalists, and mint workers, their voices blending into one tapestry. The curator calls it the digital heartbeat of memory. And through that heartbeat, the coin found new life, the legacy of inspiration artists continue to create. In Berlin, an AI-generated installation called Pennyverse simulates infinite variations of the 1971 D design, every theoretical minting error rendered in real time, none of them real, all of them possible. Visitors walk through floating copper symbols, each reacting to their movement, each dissolving as they pass. In Tokyo, a filmmaker creates a short titled 1 Cent of Light, in which a single penny reflects the entire universe in its surface. The final frame shows the coin dissolving into a digital sun. In classrooms, teachers use virtual minting labs to let students design their own future currency, encouraging them to think not just about value but about meaning. Every lesson begins the same way, with the image of the 1971 D Lincoln Cent glowing on the screen. Humanity's reflection. The camera shifts to an elderly man sitting beside a window. He is one of the last living witnesses of the original auction. He holds a simple copper penny, not the penny, but one of the same year. His hands tremble slightly as he says, "This little thing, it taught us that nothing we make is ever just what it seems, every object carries us forward." Even now, as the world changes, it's still speaking. The narrator follows, perhaps the coin was never about wealth at all, perhaps it was a message left by chance, a reminder that even in the mechanical, there can be miracles. The shot widens, showing the man's reflection in the glass merging with the reflection of the penny, as if human and coin have become one. The age of artificial memory in research centers, artificial intelligence archives now analyze global artifacts. One project, EchoVault, trains algorithms to detect cultural significance not from price but from emotional resonance. The 1971 D cent became its first data point. Scientists found that human reactions to the coin triggered consistent brain patterns: awe, nostalgia, humility. They called it emotional continuity, the idea that certain objects sustain empathy across generations. AI cannot feel wonder, but it can measure its echoes. And through those measurements, even machines began to map humanity's invisible landscape, the space where meaning lives. The spiritual paradox. As the years passed, people began to visit the museum less for the coin's value and more for meditation. Visitors described standing before the holographic display as a kind of quiet prayer. Some said the penny's simple circle reminded them of eternity, no beginning, no end, only motion. The narrator speaks softly, "When we look upon it now, we do not see metal. We see our need to remember. We see the longing to make something last." Religious scholars began referencing the penny as a secular relic, an object sanctified not by divinity but by devotion. In its smallness, they saw humility; in its survival, faith. The universal symbol across the globe, countries began issuing commemorative coins, not in imitation, but in homage. In India, a copper coin bore the engraving, "In the small, the infinite." In Brazil, a design showed a hand releasing a coin into space, symbolizing hope. Even the European Union minted a limited token bearing the quote inspired by the 1971 D phenomenon, "Worth begins where meaning is found." Through these tributes, the coin became what philosophers once dreamed of, a universal metaphor for value itself. The coin and the cosmos. In 2049, aboard a research vessel orbiting Mars, astronauts carried a small set of historic coins as a gesture to humanity's past. Among them, a replica of the 1971 D cent. When the capsule landed on Martian soil, they placed the coin beneath a transparent dome. The narrator's voice lowers to a whisper. There, on another world, beneath an alien sky, a reflection of Lincoln stared back, proof that even in the farthest silence, our history follows us. The camera pans outward, showing the red planet bathed in sunlight, the copper gleam a pinpoint among the dust. The infinite return time passes again. The story loops, as all stories do. Children born long after the auction grow up hearing myths of the 1 cent miracle. They do not speak of money, they speak of memory. To them, the 1971 D is not a coin but a compass, a reminder that humanity's worth lies not in what it possesses but in what it cherishes. The narrator concludes, 1 cent, one thought, one life. Across centuries, across machines and minds, the meaning remains. As the music rises, the screen fills with slow-motion footage, coins tumbling, spinning, colliding in light until they form a single, glowing circle, an echo of the 1971 D. The circle expands, brightens, and becomes a sun. A single camera glides over rows of display cases inside a museum still dark before opening hours. Shafts of early light move slowly across glass, catching on thousands of small circles, coins of every era, silent witnesses to the passage of centuries. The narrator's voice returns, steady, contemplative. Every civilization leaves behind two kinds of monuments, the ones it builds to be seen, and the ones it builds without knowing, objects of use that become objects of reverence. The 1971 D Lincoln cent belongs to the second kind. The collector's heart. In every city there is someone searching. In basements, attics, and quiet workshops, people bend beneath lamps, eyes magnified by lenses, fingertips stained with the faint scent of copper. They are not rich, not famous, they are the keepers of patience. A retired machinist in Denver sorts through old rolls each morning, whispering to himself that maybe one more treasure hides inside. A young student in Lahore studies the reflection of Lincoln's profile on her phone, dreaming of one day visiting the coin in Washington. A father and son in Buenos Aires spend evenings cataloging coins by year, learning history through touch. The narrator pauses. They do not chase money. They chase connection, the quiet thrill of belonging to a lineage of curiosity that began the moment humans first shaped metal into meaning. The first touch. Every collector remembers the first time they felt the weight of a coin and realized it was more than change. For some it was a childhood moment, a gift from a grandparent; for others, a discovery in the dirt behind a house. In that instant, something invisible passes from the object to the heart, a whisper that says, "I have been somewhere. I have seen things you cannot imagine." The 1971 descent amplified that whisper until the whole world could hear it. It taught millions that history hides in plain sight, waiting to be recognized. The global pilgrimage footage shifts to airports, trains, winding roads. People travel across continents to see the coin. They arrive in silence, stand before the glass, and stare at something no larger than a fingernail. A curator recounts visitors speak less and less the closer they get. It's as if the coin creates its own gravity. Children press their faces to the glass, elderly collectors bow slightly, not out of worship but of gratitude. Some bring their own pennies, laying them quietly on the floor as symbolic offerings, a ritual born of reverence, not superstition. The unseen community online, millions gather under forums and digital archives, united by curiosity. They exchange photographs, theories, and fragments of new discoveries. Though oceans apart, they speak a single language, the language of wonder. A message from one forum appears on screen: "I may never find the 1971 D, but every coin I touch feels alive now." The narrator explains, the coin created a community without borders, a congregation of seekers who understand that knowledge is a form of devotion. The measure of time in a world that moves faster each day, the act of collecting is rebellion. It demands slowness, observation, care. To turn a coin in the hand is to pause the clock for a moment, to say, "I will look closely." Historians note that after the 1971 D phenomenon, attention itself became a new form of wealth. The ability to look, to notice, to remember, these became sacred acts. The narrator's tone softens. Perhaps the collector's true treasure is time itself, the minutes spent seeing what others pass by. The philosophy of the hunt. Every hunt begins with hope and ends with understanding. For each person who searched for the 1971 descent, the search reshaped them. A collector from Prague recalls, "After years, I realized the penny was not hiding. I was hiding from patience, from stillness. The search taught me both." The camera cuts to the collector's hands, weathered and trembling slightly as they close around a simple 1971 penny, ordinary, yet somehow radiant. The narrator continues, "We chase rarity until we realize the rarest thing is the feeling of discovery itself." The myth made human in the years following its fame. Writers compared the 1971 D to the Holy Grail, to the Philosopher's Stone, to lost relics of faith. But unlike those myths, this one exists, solid, verifiable, human-made. Its miracle is not divine intervention but human attention. That is why philosophers call it the secular sacred. It proves that reverence does not require religion, only the courage to care deeply about something small. The narrator, to hold a coin is to hold evidence of human intention. To cherish it is to acknowledge the fragile miracle of creation. The passing of the torch. The film shifts to modern classrooms. Children study coins under microscopes, their laughter mixing with curiosity. Teachers tell them about the 1971 D not as a legend of wealth, but as a story of observation. A young girl says into the camera, "It's just a penny, but it feels like it's listening." Her teacher smiles and answers, "Maybe it is." Maybe every piece of history listens to those who care enough to ask. The narrator, and so, the search continues, not for profit, but for presence. Generation after generation, the torch of curiosity passes quietly from one pair of hands to the next. The eternal collector. As night falls, the museum empties. The lights dim, and the coin remains, catching the last reflection of the day. The narrator's final words for this chapter come slowly, almost a whisper. There will always be collectors, because there will always be questions, and somewhere, among the forgotten corners of our lives, a small piece of copper waits to remind us that meaning is never lost, it is only waiting to be found. The music swells, a single cello note rising into silence. The screen fades to black. Night again. The museum stands silent. Cameras drift across the hall where the 1971 descent rests beneath its circle of light. Dust floats in the beam like tiny stars. The building breathes, the city outside hums. The narrator begins one last time, the voice older now, touched by memory. 54 years have passed since this coin left the presses of Denver. It was born without ceremony, one of billions, small enough to slip unnoticed into a pocket. And yet here it remains, lifted from the river of time, set upon a pedestal, glowing like a fragment of destiny. The journey circle the film rewinds in slow motion, molten copper poured into sheets, punches striking blanks, the mint mark depressed into place, the coins spilling like red gold rain. Then the images fade into faces: workers, collectors, children, everyone who ever touched or dreamed of it. What began as labor became legend. What began as currency became conversation. What began as metal became meaning. The 1971 D cents worth, now measured at $174 million, feels almost irrelevant beside its other value, the way it taught millions to look more closely at the world in their hands. The weight of meaning: a single coin weighs 3.11 grams. Not even enough to bend a blade of grass. But its symbolic weight cannot be measured. It carries the fingerprints of a nation's ideals, the mark of its mints, the portrait of its president, and the patience of every collector who ever searched for it. Its true metal, the narrator says, is memory. Its alloy is wonder. The mint and the man: close-ups of Lincoln's profile. The copper glints across his cheek, the word liberty stands sharp beside him. The man who preserved the Union now preserves attention. His face, pressed into millions of coins, reminds us that endurance can live in the smallest of spaces. The narrator pauses, letting the music breathe, a slow piano line over faint mechanical sounds of mint presses echoing like distant drums, the echo through generations in homes around the world. Drawers still hide small piles of cents. Children will one day open them, run their fingers through the cool metal, and notice the date, 1971. Perhaps one of those children will ask, why do people care so much about this one? And someone older will answer, because caring itself is the miracle. They will tell the story again, and the story will change slightly, as stories always do. Yet its heart will remain, a lesson that greatness often disguises itself as ordinary. The museum keeper: the camera returns to the curator, locking the final case for the night. She looks once more at the coin before turning off the lights. I sometimes think it watches us, she says softly. It reminds me to slow down. Her words hang in the darkness. The faint reflection of Lincoln's face gleams in the glass, half light, half shadow, like the reflection of history itself. The coin and the cosmos outside, stars fill the sky above Denver. The narrator's voice merges with the wind. Everything that ever existed began as dust. Copper was born in the heart of a dying star, scattered across space, gathered into the earth, shaped by human hands. When we hold a coin, we hold the universe condensed into meaning. The coin becomes a mirror for the human story, our attempt to preserve value against the erasure of time. The meaning of $174 million. Economists still debate its price, auction houses still speculate, investors still whisper numbers. Yet every true collector knows the figure is only a symbol. The 1971 D cents' real fortune lies in what it inspired: decades of curiosity, craftsmanship, and quiet reverence. The worth of a coin is not the number written beside it, the narrator concludes, but the number of hearts that remembered it. The final reflection: slow montage, copper mines, mint presses, classroom microscopes, aging hands passing coins to younger ones. The cello returns, joined by a faint choir humming beneath it. Someday, the world may change its currency, its language, even its planet. But as long as there is memory, someone will still hold a small piece of copper and wonder where it has been. And in that wonder, the story will begin again. Fade to silence. The screen fades to black. Only the sound of a single coin dropping onto wood remains, sharp, clear, eternal. Then a final whisper: from the hands of workers in 1971 to the dreams of collectors today. The journey of the 1971 D cent is not about money. It is about meaning. And meaning, once found, is never lost.